This is Ireland Radar. Today I'm joined by Shane Flynn. Shane, how are you doing?
I'm good, thank you very much. Thanks for having me on.
Right, we wanted to have you on kind of to talk about the landscape of Irish football. There's a lot of movement with young players going from the League of Ireland over to England, and obviously your experiences about that have been very interesting, which you've been documenting recently onto your TikTok. For those who don't know you, Shane, you're a professional football player. You moved over to England for quite a young age, which is obviously something that's not happening anymore at the moment, which is really why we wanted to talk about this to see. The differences that we might find. But I think that to kick things off, the best place to start is to tell us about your background, kind of joining Leicester City from such a young age, from your time at Bray Wanderers as a young teenager.
Yeah, so I was at St Joseph's Boys here in Dublin, and when we used to have a tournament that used to be on, people might remember it, the Hibernia Trophy. It was a bit like a showcase tournament for the under 15s team, and from there went on trial to Leicester. Obviously had a couple of trials and agreed to sign once I was in the summer of becoming a first year scholar, and then in that kind of, I'd say it was maybe like a 12-month period or so, 18-month period it could have been actually. I was just in with Bray's under 17s, under 19s, and first team. Um, as kind of the time moved closer to it, I was playing with the 19s and training with the first team on a regular basis. And then obviously, once the July of 2018 came, I was free to move over to Leicester on official terms and was there from 16 to 22.
Yeah, obviously, like 16, it's so young to move over, and obviously players have done it younger, but it's different. But uh, I suppose your time there at Leicester, did you feel close to entering the first team? Because of course you made appearances on the bench of Premier League games. You made appearances on the bench of Europa League under Rodgers' squad as well. As your time as a whole, would you say it's a positive, or did things kind of break down towards the end?
Yeah, I think I've made it. Anyone who knows who I am, I've made it quite clear, about how things kind of broke down towards the end. But I think when I look back at things, I think there was probably a very small window there where I thought I could potentially get in and get an opportunity, at least in pre-season, to show what I can do. That could potentially lead to me getting a loan. And then the club signed Ryan Bertrand, and I knew I hadn't a chance then. It was always going to be difficult because Luke Thomas was obviously very highly rated at the time, was playing in England's under 19s, under 20s, and then eventually under 21s. Um, I knew it wasn't very realistic that I was going to get into the first team there after a while, but I suppose the hope was always there that I'd get out on loan and show what I could do there and potentially work my way in it if the opportunity arose. That's the way you kind of have to look at things.
Yeah, as in terms of like obviously as I said, setting the landscape for the young lads moving over, you obviously have a very different than when you're going at 16. If you were to stay in the League of Ireland, you probably get a couple of years of professional football, which the likes of Mason Melia and Victor Oshabuna have started to get, and you've seen how well that's worked from a league standpoint. In the point that we've probably got this academy funding that we're not wouldn't have got otherwise. I wouldn't. I'd argue if it wasn't for those moves as well, but. Kind of, what are the differences you would say as a player that you've had when you were there at 16, from not only the physical level to the standard of football that you're playing in, but also the environment, the country you're playing in, that maybe it's going to be different for the likes of Mason and Victor who are going to go when they're a few years older and different experiences.
I think the biggest thing is Mason and Victor have spent probably the 12 months prior to going over in a men's changing room where what you do matters. And there's what's the word I'm looking for? Sanctions if things aren't going well, if that makes sense.
Mm.
There's real criticism there. And that's not just like internally, that's from fans, that's from media. Um, I think that will really help mature their mindset and how they're doing things, as opposed to when I would have gone at 16. You're going into an under 18 Premier League. It's basically like it's still underage football. Like the only people going to your games, you might get the odd scout, but it's really just your parents, maybe your friends of local lads. Even though the quality is higher than what's going on here, it's still the exact same in that regard, is that it's underage football. Whereas for Victor and Mason, that's not the case for them. They've been basically full professional footballers and are now kind of almost stepping back down a rung on the ladder, if that makes sense, into probably under 21 territory. Of, I presume when Victor goes over, that's what he'll do. And I presume that's what Mason is in at the moment in terms of a changing room that they're in. And when you're in those under 21 changing rooms, man, you can get like such a variety, as you can in men's ones. But what I mean by is like you can get some seriously childish people in those changing rooms. Do you know what I mean? Because the reality is, like, some of these lads haven't lived away from home. Some of these lads have only ever been in that academy. You know, there's like prima donnas there that think they're God's gift and that sort of thing. And, you know, generally speaking, in senior changing rooms, you're not going to get away with that sort of attitude. And I'm sure it'll be a bit of a, I'm sure it'll be a surprise for Victor when he goes and Mason when he arrived, you know, of some of the attitudes that are there in such an elite environment.
Yeah, I said that we're still on the early stages, you know, like what everyone is saying, and I suppose what we've said loads over here as well. That, oh, it's great that these players are going over, but you know, we don't know how it's really going to shake out for them just yet because maybe there'll be this reaction to going from men's senior football to kind of underage football. It all really depends on what their club's intentions were with them. I think are whether the likes do they find loan deals or are they going to be stuck in under 21s. I mean, if you hear from players who've had to defend the likes of Mason Melia in the League of Ireland, they talk about the development he's had between the
Mm.
2 years. Between like the first year, he was clearly a boy. In the second year, like you're playing against a man, you know, and you could see those. But do you wish that kind of from your position how things ended up with you? Would there have been that landscape there where you maybe stayed in Ireland for a couple more years, or would have advised yourself, or being in St. Boots, would you still have made the same move?
See, because I spent so long laterally out injured, um, it's hard to give a definitive answer. But if you were to ask me this when I was maybe 16, 17 in the under 18s team at Leicester, I remember we had, you might know him, Darragh O'Connor. I think he's at Wraith
Mm,
Rovers now. He became a very good friend of mine at Leicester. I used to be so jealous of him because, like, he was laughing. If football didn't work out for him, he had his leaving cert. He had everything sorted. Do you know what I mean? And that's from the standpoint of being 17. Now that I'm 24, I think there's routes for me to go down, you know, mature routes in college and stuff like that. But when you're in that gap period of maybe like 18 to 23, 24, like there's 5 years where there isn't really, unless you go to UCD, you know, you can't go in a mature route. You don't have a leaving cert. It's very difficult. And I think at that age, I probably would have said, yeah, I would have liked to have stayed at home, got a couple of years in a senior team. But it's one of them, isn't it? Like, maybe the reason I went is because of the environment I was in. Like, chances are, if I had stayed and didn't get a move, I wouldn't have stayed at Bray. Like, Bray at the time were a far cry from what they are now in terms of a stable environment, you
mm.
know? If you remember, it was like the time when they were releasing statements about like North Korea and crazy stuff like that. There's no way I would have stayed at the club there. I probably would have gone to someone, you know, more higher up or along the ladder or with a better development of players. Potentially, UCD is it's a local enough team to me from where I'm living in Dublin. But yeah, I think certainly when I was that age of when my mates were in fifth, sixth year, I remember looking at Darren thinking to myself, like, geez, I wish I had that, you know?
Yeah, yeah, I get that point as well. I think one of your TikToks that you posted, one that really took me back, and I think as well it got sent around a group chat as well because you don't often hear people talking about this, you know, because we're always saying about young players in Ireland are on the upward trajectory, but you know you go from Leicester to Waterford and you find it difficult, and you don't you know you talked about how difficult it is going from an environment where you're in underage football to go and playing those senior minutes and everything you just talked about there was included in that point. You know, it's not something you often hear from footballers, and it was a real eye opener, really. Do you have anything to expand on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think the guy who asked me the question, it's a very good, like, it's a good question. And I think if I didn't play the game and have that background, I would have been under the same thought process that, Jesus, you're coming back from a Premier League academy. But I know lads personally who have gone away and have since come home that were kind of in that same situation. And when I was kind of given the TikTok, they were the people I had in mind, you know. Like I was, when you're doing them TikToks, you have to condense everything down into a minute or two to keep people engaged. But like I was in a much more fortunate situation, we'll say, where I got a second contract. I got the opportunity to stay over there, save a bit of money and that sort of thing, whereas these lads didn't. And it's very difficult, as I said, you're seen as like this, footballer from 14 years of age, and that's what you're known as. That's not even like a personality thing. That's just who you are as a person. And all of a sudden, very quickly, that gets stripped away from you and taken down and down and down, because you go back to a League of Ireland Premier Division club, you realise very quickly, as I said, you're not good enough to play in the Premier Division. You end up getting dropped down into the 19s team, and your motivation just dips, and then you're thinking to yourself, Jesus, like everyone here is thinking, what the hell is going on? Like I was in the UK, and then you start to get into your own head a bit about it. Like it's and you're, as I said, you're dealing with all that by yourself, because it is such a niche thing to be dealing with. There isn't obviously going to be support networks there
Mm.
for it. Um, and I find even when I came home, like there aren't too many people in your own personal life generally who will understand what you're going through. So it's quite hard to really get your thought process through, and have people understand what it is you're feeling when you're going through it. So you're kind of just doing it by yourself, which is fine when I'm 22, 23, but doing that at 18 is an awful lot tougher.
Yeah, and I suppose it's difficult as well because everyone probably looks at you as like a player who's, he's moved up across the sea and he's made it when he's 16, and obviously there's a long path ahead when you come back. It can't be seen as anything other than a failure, even if the case is it's not. It's just an incredibly difficult environment, and plenty of players have found that. I don't imagine any of them or many of them have found it easy coming back. But I mean, even looking at the other end of the scale, which is completely off topic, I think there's maybe also an underestimating of the League of Ireland at the moment. If we, I mean, the angle of James McLean coming back, it looks like that he looked like he'd walk all over the league, and at the moment he's found it more difficult. So as well, it's not like you're coming back to a low level, but that point that the senior football is definitely a good one. Hopefully, the players staying over are at the moment are going to benefit from that. And I think many will follow in their footsteps. You see Michael Noonan staying for another year as well, which it looks like it's benefited him already because he's had a great start to the season. Aside from that as well, you've also played a lot of time or a bit of time in underage international football. Obviously with in Switzerland or playing against Switzerland in 2021. Do you have positive experiences from your time playing in the 21s and 19s?
Um, my issue when I was in the 21s was, how do I say this? The 4 games that I was called up for were friendlies, right? There was an
Mm,
opportunity for everyone to get game time and show what you can do to put your self forward to be in a competitive squad for the qualifiers. And the problem I found coming away from it was we just weren't given it. Like a lot of us weren't given any game time. So I remember being out there and I was thinking, what am I actually here for? Like by the time the third get, like I played Switzerland, and I think it might have been Denmark or something. I think I played like 5 minutes at the end of the third game of out in Marbella in that trip. I just remember sitting on the bench as the game started, and I thought, why is he actually bothered bringing me out here? Like I could have. It just made no sense because I was told I was going to be given minutes because
mm.
he brought a squad out to Wrexham that time and left about 6 of us sitting on the bench for 90 minutes, which to me makes absolutely no sense whatsoever when you're playing a friendly. And I thought, right, okay. And in fairness to Jim Crawford, he rang me and apologised for it and told me there'd be more minutes when we go out to Spain. And as I said, I played about 15 minutes or 10 minutes in that Switzerland game. I was told I was going to start against Australia. That didn't happen. I thought, all right, cool. Like plans change. That's football. You have to be ready to adapt to it, whatever. I went into the whole thing thinking, right, well, I haven't started the first two. I'll start the third one. And when the team was announced for the third one, I was like, yeah, I'm never getting called up to the 21s again.
Oh,
You
really?
know, that's the reality of it. I knew I was never going to be called up to the 21s again. I could have been doing as well as I could in Leicester's under 21s. Could have hit the ground running in pre-season and that sort of thing. But Jim and John O'Shea and that just obviously didn't fancy me and see enough in me. And I'm not sitting here with sour grapes. That's perfectly fine. As things transpired with Joel Bagan declaring for Ireland, I probably wouldn't have got into the squad anyway. Do you know what I mean? So I don't sit here like I look at it from a disappointment perspective that I didn't get to play more. I don't look at it in a you know, or I try my best not to look at it with kind of, what's the word I'm looking for? Like the words completely slipped my mind. I'm sorry. In a annoyed, kind of pissed off type of manner. I try and accept it for what it was. Be grateful for the fact that I got to play for it, because in fairness, the only manager who ever called me up to play for him was Jim. Like at under 18s, like I never got called up at 15s, 16s, 17s, or 19s. Jim called me up at 18s and 21s, so I do have to be thankful for that at the same time, you know. But I just came away from the 21s. My time at the 21s was a real disappointment that I didn't get a fair opportunity to show what I could do when I was in the squads.
Yeah, and that's entirely fair enough as well, I suppose. Just back to your time in England. I mean, there's constant debates of Ireland, what type of players we're producing, and maybe more importantly, what type of players we aren't producing. Which at the moment the debate has been obviously the centre midfield position has looked incredibly weak for quite some time, but the fact that we're not producing many technical gifted footballers as well. I suppose from your time in England, can you see with the way things were with training, like with training from underage to being involved in first team football to just, I mean, the setup in the country? Can you see where Ireland can improve? Where if Ireland are to be, bringing up a next crop of future generations, maybe not the one now, but the one after it, like how are we going to improve as a country? What do we have to do to do that?
it's it's one of them things. Like I did a video on it yesterday. Like it's really interesting to me, particularly during the last maybe year or so at Leicester, because I did. Sean Rooney is his name. He's a fellow from Swords. He was a coach at Leicester, and he let me do a bit with his under 12s, 13s team. And I found it so interesting working with those guys because they have like the footballing culture in Ireland versus England is completely different with young kids, like completely different. When you're looking, I know kids aren't set up in their actual. Hello, sorry,
Yeah, yeah,
sorry, I just had a low battery percentage there. I know kids aren't like destined for their positions at maybe 11 or 12 years of age, but the kids who are playing in those attacking roles versus when I was doing it, for example, because I obviously as a kid was always a winger or a striker. These young kids in England, they want to embarrass their opponents. And maybe part of it is to get clips on social media or stuff like that, right? But they want to show their skills, a bit of flair on the pitch. What can they do to sit their opponent down, put it, a nutmeg is celebrated almost. Whereas here, that's not, or certainly when I was growing up, that's not really the case. Players weren't even thinking about doing that sort of thing. And I understand that sort of thing doesn't translate necessarily to the senior game. But when you get young players who are fixated on the technical side of things, a bit of skill, maybe a flick here and there, it creates that I guess, a culture of wanting to be more technical on the ball. Like I knew a lad at Leicester, Will Alves. Oh, Jesus, I'd be very surprised if we ever have a lad as technical. If we had a lad as technical as him, when he was in Leicester's 21s in Ireland, he would have been called up to the Irish senior team, or I would like to think he would have, because the guy's he's like that type of West Highland player that the country has been crying out for years. But Will was fixated on skills and technical development with the ball at his feet. It wasn't coming from a club perspective of being, Leicester weren't hammering him with do this, do that, do the other for skills. I noticed a lot of it was down to the individual player and the culture that's maybe it is kind of, when they get together as a group of lads, that's what they want. But I just found, culturally speaking, of football, it's just not in our footballing DNA to be those type of people. And I got a comment left on my video the other day or yesterday, and it was like, we tend to be more of this introverted, nation of people in general, where anyone who sticks their head above the parapet, that um, shows confidence or maybe even a bit of arrogance, is kind of looked down upon, or what's he doing with himself. And I think that probably plays its part in it as well. Whereas in England, that's not necessarily the case. Those types of things can be, you know you stick out your chest and say, yeah, I'm a good player, I'm going to back myself up and I'm going to show what I can do. People rate that, whereas here it's a bit like, oh, you know do a
yeah.
double take.
I tend to agree on that as well. I think there's maybe a bit too much modesty when it comes to that thing in terms of Ireland. Definitely, like I think most people here can see it. I think it's something that Damien Duff also kind of agreed on, with the fact that needing more like the technical thing. Like I think he mentioned cage football before and things like that, where there's so much access to this here. And I see one of the comments on your video as well about like all astroturfs and that crack being locked up. Like even if I want to now just for a recreational kickabout with my mates, like it can be like an awful hard time to organize even just booking a five-a-side pitch sometimes. So I think that kind of thing is where is an issue in Ireland as well. Just to kind of come to where you are now, you after after Waterford, you went up to Ballymena as well. Like, how is that difference? going from full-time football to semi-pro football or part-time football more so. Like that must have been a great change, kind of something you've never really experienced before.
Yeah, obviously, like it was tough first training session, pull your hamstring, not ideal,
Mm.
and then you miss. But that I guess that gave me a real eye opener into what part time football is like, because when I was at Leicester and I had my injury problems, like there was always someone I could liaise with and speak to face on a daily basis. If there was an issue, if things making checking up things were going well, is this okay? My rehab program, can we advance my rehab program onto something else? Whereas when I was at Ballymena, I'd go down to my local fly fit gym, and I'd have this rehab program, and if I had a question or say something was paining me whilst I was doing the exercise, I'd send a text to the physio. But the physio is also part time. He has a full time job. He can't be just at my beck and call the whole time. So I often wouldn't get an answer till maybe that evening or the following day. And by that stage, like, well, it's pointless because the session's nearly 24 hours gone at this point, you know? And that took some getting used to. I found I nearly had to be um, having every sort of communication that I wanted to have with him when I got the opportunity to do it in person, which would only be like twice a week. Um, and that was difficult. And then when I came back to full fitness, it was also difficult because when you're training twice a week, it's not enough. Do you know what I mean? When you're coming up against clubs like Linfield, Larne, even Coleraine to an extent where we're kind of getting to that point where they were pushing themselves to get up there, they're nearly full time outfits. I know Linfield are. I think Larne were as well. I think Coleraine might have just gone, but maybe they weren't at the time. But if you want to compete with those lads, you have to be doing stuff in your own time anyway. You know, um, and that took something to get used to because really it's down to you then. Whereas like when you've got team training and that, yeah, it's still down to you. You have to do the yards, but the session is being put on. Like you have to put this session on yourself on top of the team training sessions. It was a real eye opener for sure.
Yeah, I'd say that's probably not an easy adjustment, and obviously you were incredibly unfortunate with injury there as part as well with your time with Leicester. Obviously as well now you find yourself without a club. Is it a case of trying to find somewhere new to go, keep as fit as you can until the summer, and pick up where you can?
Yeah, that's basically it. Obviously, I get a lot of people asking me in the comments, "Am I still playing? What am I doing with myself now?" Blah blah blah. Like, I'm just trying to keep myself fit. Um, I had hoped when I came home. Sorry, the Ipswich game's on there in the background. I had hoped when I came home um, from my last club that I could get something here, kind of because I left them in November, early December time, and I thought I could get something in the first division even, just to kind of get myself back playing, because that's really been my issue. I just need to be playing games. Um, but when you're in the game, you know very, very quickly whether that's going to happen or not. And I probably knew after about a week or two I have no club, and that wasn't going to be the case. Um, did I think I'd be sitting here in April with no club? Probably not. Knowing I probably won't get another one till the summer at some point. If I get another one, no, I didn't. But that's just the way football goes. It's a ruthless game, and it's one of those things. Like I've had a few thoughts about, well, should I go back and play Leinster Senior? Should I go do this, do that? But the reality of the situation is, like, I've probably made the mistake of dropping too far down the run with my last club, and that's probably, the way you say, I'll take one step back to take two steps forward. Well, I've probably taken one step back too many times now, um, to the point where you're probably standing on the edge of the cliff, and if you fall off, that's your career done. Not to be dramatic about it, but like that's probably the reality of the situation for myself. But obviously, as I said, I keep myself working hard, I keep myself in good shape. I'm in the gym regularly, I'm out doing runs regularly, and you're just hoping that the phone will ring, really, because at the end of the day, like if I want to get a club, I have to be in the best shape as soon as at the drop of a hat.
Yeah, that can't be an easy situation, and I wish you the best of luck with that. Of course, I think we were all a bit surprised as well. Obviously, you alluded to in the video as well, when the kind of the free agent tweet of you went circulated around everywhere on Twitter. But yeah, we'd hope you would a new club possibly in the summer. Finally, just to end off, I'll put you on the spot here with Leicester City's current situation. It looks all but destined for the drop now. Were there any warning signs kind of when you were there of this could happen, or can you see how this is they've gotten themselves into this situation? Because now, look, I can't pretend to be in the know with what's happening at Leicester. I do have good friends who are Leicester City fans, but I'm kind of surprised how they've gotten into this situation. Is there anything that you could have seen where things a mess behind the scenes, or kind of any ideas how this could have happened to them?
So things certainly tailed off, as you can imagine, if you look back over the years, very quickly. Like it went from finishing back to back, probably bottling the Champions League, let's be honest, like top four finishes, to a 12th place finish, I think it was, relegation. And like people kept saying at the time, they're too good to go down, they're too good to go down, but like they weren't. And I was under no illusion based off just the vibe you got in the building. Like it's almost like, when you step in somewhere and you feel like the air is heavy.
Mm.
Like that's how it felt a lot of the time when you were in the building and the first team were losing week on week. And I just kept thinking to myself, like, this isn't me trying to act like a genius. Do you know what I mean? Like, but it's I didn't think they were too good to go down. And I genuinely thought, like, when you'd be training with them and that, like, it just, when you just can't buy a break when you're down there. Tottenham are kind of going through it at the moment. You're just thinking to yourself, like, how are you going to see a way out of this? And now, I mean, I watched the game yesterday, like it's difficult to watch. Do you know what I mean? I'm gonna be honest. Like I remember, I probably when I left the club, I probably left with bitterness, probably in my heart, to be honest, and probably would have wished relegation on them or put them in the position that they're in now. But I look at it now. Obviously, time, well, a huge thing of time is the biggest healer of stuff, and you have to let things go. Like I don't get any enjoyment of sitting there looking at the way Leicester played yesterday, and I feel like their fans have been absolutely brilliant with me, like in terms of support. Like I did a podcast with the Leicester fan page, and it was brilliant. Like it's tough to watch, for their perspective, but also the harsh reality of the situation is back to back relegations mean layoffs. People I know are going to lose their jobs. And realistically, where's that going to start? It's not going to be in the first team. It's going to be in the academy. So it is people that I actually knew and got along with well on a daily basis that chances are they're going to lose their jobs now. Um, but man, like I think a lot of the Leicester fans have their idea of where things have come from and where things have gone wrong. Obviously, it's hard for me to say. Do I know for a fact? No, but what you know, I don't think they're too outlandish claims with some of them that I've seen. Some of them are crazy, and you're just like, man, you're just so far off the mark. But some of them, I'm like, I probably wouldn't disagree with either.
Yeah, I think tends to be the case when things start going badly as well. You say with those outlandish claims. But yeah, I think I'll leave you there, Shane, for that. I'll let you get back to watching the football as well. Thanks very much for joining us, and best of luck with the future.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. Appreciate it, Dylan.
Have a good one, man.
Thanks. Bye.